My name is Jazmin Torres, and I'm 27 years old. 3 weeks ago, the man I thought I'd spend my life with sent me a text that changed everything. You're clingy and desperate. I need space from your neediness. I stared at those words for 20 minutes straight, sitting in my car outside the grocery store, milk getting warm in the back seat. The thing is, I wasn't surprised. I was relieved. Because that text finally gave me permission to stop pretending that his silence was love, that his distance was depth, that his criticism was care. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. But before I tell you what I replied, before I show you how this story ends, you need to understand how it began. Because the truth is, I spent 2 years slowly disappearing, convincing myself that love meant making yourself smaller so someone else could feel bigger. And the man who called me desperate. He had no idea that the family he mocked, the background he dismissed, the life he thought was beneath him was actually the foundation holding up his entire world. My apartment in Seattle smells like lavender and fresh paint. I'm an interior designer, the kind who works with small budgets and big dreams, helping young families turn rental apartments into homes. It's not glamorous. Most months I'm scrambling to make rent. But when a single mom texts me a photo of her daughter's bedroom, the one I designed with thrifted furniture and discount fabric, and says her kid finally wants to spend time in her own room, that's when I remember why I do this. My family never understood it. The Torres family built something different. My father, Marco Torres, started Torres Development Group 30 years ago with nothing but a contractor's license and a willingness to work 18-hour days. Now the company designs and builds commercial spaces all over the Pacific Northwest. My mother, Linda, runs operations. My older brother Adrian manages project logistics. My younger sister Camila just finished her architecture degree and joined the firm last year. They're a machine, efficient and impressive. And then there's me, the one who chose vintage furniture over steel beams, the one who paints accent walls instead of skyscrapers. I never resented them for their success. I just needed to prove I could build something on my own terms. So professionally, I go by Jazmin Reyes, my mother's maiden name. It keeps things clean. No assumptions. No expectations. Just me and my work. I met Ryan Foster at a design expo 18 months ago. He was standing in front of a display on sustainable architecture, taking notes like his life depended on it. Tall, focused, with this intensity that made you want to know what he was thinking. When he caught me staring, he smiled and asked if I thought bamboo flooring was actually sustainable or just trendy. We talked for 2 hours. He bought me coffee. By the end of the night, I had his number and a feeling in my chest I hadn't felt in years. Ryan was different from anyone I'd dated. He was ambitious but not arrogant, at least not at first. He talked about wanting to design buildings that mattered, structures that would outlive him. He worked as a junior architect at some firm downtown. He didn't talk about it much, just said it was a good place to learn, good mentors, solid projects. I liked that he was humble. I liked that he seemed hungry for something real. The first 6 months were beautiful in that reckless, breathless way new love always is. We'd meet after work and walk through Pike Place Market. He'd sketch buildings on napkins while I described color palettes. He said I saw the world differently, that I made ordinary spaces feel alive. I fell in love with the way he listened, like every word I said mattered. But somewhere around month 7, things shifted. It was subtle at first. He'd cancel plans last minute, saying work was overwhelming. He'd go days without texting, then reappear with an apology and a joke. When I'd ask to see him, he'd sigh and say he needed space to focus. I started wondering if I was asking for too much. If wanting to see your partner more than once a week made you needy. I started keeping track without meaning to. 3 texts from me for every one from him. 5 date suggestions that went unanswered before he'd finally agree to one. Hours spent wondering if I'd said something wrong, done something to push him away. My sister Camila noticed first. We were having lunch at this little Vietnamese place near her office when she looked up from her pho and said, You've checked your phone 6 times in 10 minutes. What's going on? I laughed it off, said I was waiting to hear back from a client. She didn't buy it. Jazz, you're disappearing. You know that, right? You're shrinking. I wanted to argue, but my throat felt tight. Because she was right. I'd stopped posting my design work online because Ryan said it seemed like I was trying too hard for validation. I'd turned down a girls' weekend with friends because he'd mentioned he might be free that Saturday, even though he never confirmed. I'd started apologizing for things that weren't my fault, just to keep the peace. When I finally met Ryan's friends, I understood why he kept me at arm's length. We went to a rooftop bar in Capitol Hill, and his college buddies treated me like I was temporary. They barely looked at me when they spoke. One of them, Marcus, made a joke about Ryan always dating projects, and everyone laughed. Ryan laughed too. I smiled and excused myself to the bathroom where I stared at my reflection and wondered when I'd become someone who accepted being called a project. That night, walking back to my car, I asked Ryan what Marcus meant. He shrugged. He's just messing around. You're too sensitive. Too sensitive. I'd heard that before. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. When I'd asked why he didn't want to meet my family. When I'd mentioned feeling ignored. When I'd tried to talk about our future. Every time I expressed a need, it became a flaw. Every time I asked for reassurance, it became proof that I was too much. But I stayed. Because the good moments, when they came, felt like sunlight after weeks of rain. He'd show up at my apartment with takeout and we'd watch old movies. He'd text me photos of buildings he thought I'd appreciate. He'd tell me I was the only person who really understood him. And I'd think, this is the real Ryan. The other stuff is just stress. Just work pressure. Just temporary. Then one Tuesday, everything cracked open. I'd been working on a proposal for a boutique hotel renovation, my biggest project yet. I was nervous, excited, terrified. I texted Ryan asking if he wanted to celebrate with dinner if I landed it. He responded 3 hours later. Can't tonight. Swamped with a deadline. You understand. I did understand. I always understood. But this time, something in me finally broke. I called Camila. She answered on the first ring. I need to come home, I said. My voice sounded strange, hollow. She didn't ask questions. Doors open. Mom's making pozole. When I walked into my parents' house that evening, the smell of hominy and chili hit me like a memory I'd been trying to forget. My mom took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. My dad appeared from his office, reading glasses perched on his head, and just nodded like he'd been expecting this. Over dinner, I told them everything. Not about Ryan specifically, just about feeling lost. Adrian, my brother, listened quietly while cutting his cornbread into precise squares. When I finished, he said, "You know what's funny? We hired this new architect a few months back. Kid's talented but has this chip on his shoulder. Keeps talking about how he got where he is on merit alone, how he doesn't believe in shortcuts or family connections. Acts like everyone else is getting handouts." He paused. "Reminds me of how you described your boyfriend once." My stomach dropped. "What firm did you say Ryan works for?" Adrian's eyes met mine. "He works for us, Jazmin Torres Development Group. Has for about 8 months now." The room tilted. My mother's hand found mine under the table. My father set down his spoon very carefully. "The Ryan Foster who's been dating our daughter?" Adrian nodded. "Same one. He has no idea you're related to us. I've heard him in meetings talking about his girlfriend, the interior designer. Never mentions your last name." I couldn't breathe. For 8 months, Ryan had been working at my family's company. The firm my father built from nothing. The place my mother poured her life into. The business my siblings dedicated their careers to. And he had no idea. Because I'd hidden it. Because I'd wanted him to love me for me, not for what my family had. But now I realized something worse. He'd been criticizing them without knowing who they were. I remembered a conversation from 2 months ago. Ryan had come over frustrated after a long day. My boss is so demanding, he'd complained. Wants everything triple-checked. Acts like one mistake will ruin the entire project. I'd tried to be supportive. Maybe he just cares about quality? Ryan had scoffed. Or maybe he's a control freak who doesn't trust anyone. That's what happens with these family businesses. Nepotism breeds paranoia. I sat at my parents' dining table, the weight of Adrian's words settling into my bones like concrete. Ryan had been working for my family for 8 months. 8 months of him complaining about demanding bosses and family nepotism, never knowing he was talking about the people who raised me. Never knowing that the control freak he mocked was my father, the man who taught me to ride a bike and stayed up helping me with college applications. My mother squeezed my hand. Mija, you don't have to tell him. Not yet. Not until you're ready. But I knew that moment would come whether I was ready or not. These things always surface eventually. My father cleared his throat, his voice steady and calm like it always was during crisis. Jazmin, I want you to know something. We evaluate every employee on their work, not their relationships. Ryan's been doing well. His designs are thoughtful. He listens to feedback. Whatever happens between you two, that won't change how we see his professional value. That's what hurt most. My family, the one Ryan had unknowingly insulted for months, had been supporting his career. Mentoring him. Giving him opportunities. While he'd been telling me I was too needy for wanting basic attention. While he'd been making me feel small for asking to matter. I drove home that night with my hands shaking on the wheel. When I got to my apartment, I sat in the parking lot for 30 minutes before going inside. My phone buzzed. A text from Ryan. Sorry, I've been distant. Work's intense right now. Big project deadline. You get it, right? I stared at those words. You get it, right? I always got it. I always understood. I always made myself smaller so he'd have room to grow, never realizing he was growing in soil my family had tended. The next 2 weeks were agony. Ryan and I barely spoke. When we did, it was surface-level exchanges about weather and work. I stopped reaching out first. I wanted to see how long it would take him to notice. It took 6 days before he sent a message. Hey, feels like you've been pulling away. Everything okay? I almost laughed. After months of him creating distance, the moment I stopped chasing, I was the one pulling away. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I threw myself into work. That boutique hotel project I'd been nervous about came through. The owner loved my proposal and wanted me to start immediately. It was the biggest commission of my career, and I had no one to celebrate with. I thought about texting Ryan, then remembered his "can't tonight" swamped response from weeks ago. Instead, I called Camila. She screamed so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. We're celebrating. Tomorrow night. No excuses. The celebration happened at my parents' house because my mother insisted on cooking. The whole family showed up. Adrian brought champagne. My father gave one of his rare, genuine smiles and said, "Knew you had it in you, Mija. You built something real." It was the first time in months I felt like I could breathe fully. Like I didn't have to apologize for taking up space. That's when my phone buzzed again. Ryan. We need to talk. Can you come over tonight? Something about the tone felt different. Colder. I excused myself from the table and stepped onto the back patio. What's wrong? I texted back. His response came quickly. Just come over. We need to discuss some things about us. I knew what was coming. I could feel it in the formality of his words, the distance in his tone. I told my family I had to leave. My mother's eyes were worried, but she didn't push. Call me later, she said quietly. I nodded and left, the taste of my celebration dinner turning bitter in my mouth. Ryan's apartment was in Fremont, a small one-bedroom he'd decorated with the minimum effort required to call it furnished. When I arrived, he was sitting on the couch, phone in hand, looking like he'd been practicing what to say. Hey, he said, not getting up. Hey, I replied, staying near the door. Something told me not to get comfortable. He set his phone down and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Clinical. Detached. Jazmin, I've been doing a lot of thinking. About us. About what I need right now. My heart started pounding, but I kept my face neutral. Okay. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I used to find endearing. Now it just looked rehearsed. I think you're a great person. Really. But lately, I've been feeling suffocated. You're always wanting to see me, always asking where I am, what I'm doing. It's a lot of pressure. The words hung in the air between us like smoke. I stood there, coat still on, keys in my hand, and felt something shift inside me. Not heartbreak. Something closer to clarity. Suffocated, I repeated slowly. Yes. I need someone more independent. Someone who has their own life and doesn't need constant validation. He said it like he'd been workshopping the phrase, like he'd convinced himself this was truth rather than excuse. I thought about the last 2 weeks. How I'd stopped reaching out first. How I'd gotten the biggest project of my career and he hadn't even asked about it. How I'd spent months accommodating his schedule, his needs, his convenient availability. When's the last time I asked to see you? I said quietly. He blinked, thrown off by the question. What? When's the last time I asked you to spend time with me? The last time I called you? Texted you first? He shifted uncomfortably. That's not the point. It's the energy you bring. The neediness. I can feel it even when you're not saying anything. The neediness. There it was. The word I'd been afraid of for months, the label he'd been waiting to use. I felt it land, felt the sting of it, and then felt something else entirely. Anger. Clean, clarifying anger. Tell me something, Ryan. This big project that's been stressing you out. The one at work. What is it? He looked confused by the subject change. It's a mixed-use development in Belltown. Why? I nodded slowly. And your boss, the demanding one. The control freak from the family business. What's his name? His eyes narrowed. Why does that matter? Just curious. You've talked about him so much. I realized I don't even know his name. Ryan's jaw tightened. Marco Torres. He's the founder. Runs everything like it's his personal kingdom. I felt my heart hammering against my ribs. Marco Torres, I repeated. And what about the woman in operations? The one you said micromanages every detail? He threw his hands up. Linda Torres. His wife. Look, I don't understand why we're talking about my job right now. I'm trying to tell you that this relationship isn't working. It's working fine, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. You just don't want to do the work. His face flushed. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You're so demanding. I tell you I need space and you argue. This is why I can't do this anymore. He stood up, pacing now. You want to know the truth? You're clingy. You're desperate for attention. And I'm tired of feeling guilty every time I prioritize my career over your feelings. There it was. The final card played. The killing blow he thought would end this on his terms. I watched him, this man I'd loved for 18 months, this man I'd made myself smaller for, and felt nothing but pity. You're right, I said. His head snapped up, surprised. I am? You need space. You need someone more independent. Someone who won't expect you to show up. I pulled out my phone. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you all the space you need. I opened our text thread and began typing. My fingers were steady. My breath was even. For the first time in months, I knew exactly what to say. I finished typing and hit send before I could second-guess myself. Ryan's phone buzzed on the coffee table. He picked it up, read it, and his face went pale. "What is this?" he whispered. I'd sent him one sentence. "Marco and Linda Torres are my parents. Good luck with that space you needed." He stared at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. "You're joking." I shook my head. Adrian Torres is my brother. Camila Torres just started in the architecture division. And me? I'm Jazmin Torres. I use Reyes professionally because I wanted to build something on my own. Guess we both got what we wanted. The color drained from his face completely. You let me work there. You let me talk about your family like that. His voice cracked. You knew the whole time. I picked up my keys. I found out 2 weeks ago. And you know what's funny? They've been nothing but professional with you. They think you're talented. They've given you real opportunities. Everything you accuse them of being, nepotistic, unfair, you're everything they're not. He reached for me. Jazmin, wait. I didn't know. I never would have said those things if I'd known. I stepped back. That's the problem, Ryan. You only care now because you know. Those things you said about my father being a control freak? He's been mentoring you. My mother micromanaging? She's been protecting the quality of work that has your name on it. You called me needy for wanting to see my boyfriend once a week, but you've been depending on my family's company for your entire career trajectory. He sank onto the couch, head in his hands. What are you going to do? Are you going to tell them to fire me? I almost laughed. I don't need to do anything. My family judges people on their work, not their personal drama. That's what integrity looks like. You'll figure it out eventually, or you won't. I walked to the door and paused. For what it's worth, I wasn't clingy. I was just asking to be treated like I mattered. There's a difference. I left him sitting there in his half-furnished apartment, surrounded by the career built on the foundation of people he'd spent months disrespecting. The night air was cold and clean. I got in my car, drove straight to my parents' house, and walked into warmth, laughter, and people who never made me feel like loving them was a burden. That text he sent calling me desperate? I never responded. Some statements don't deserve replies. They deserve distance. And I finally had all the space I needed. Space to breathe. Space to build. Space to be whole. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.